Yes, it really is that cold. Today I want to talk about how we seem to have settled on making our workplace, our workspace, our main object that we write with a kind of combination of a calculator and a typewriter. The problem I have with these things, and no matter how hard Apple, Steve Jobs, Jony Ive have tried to make them fun, they still possess at their heart an operating system that is based on something designed by IBM for clerical use, folders, files, desktops. I mean, since when did we become desk jockeys? I made a film a few weeks ago about whether media music is all shit. Of course, I argued that it isn't. But the homogenization of music as a whole, I think, is occurring because of the computerization. The computers, by the nature of what they are, clerical tools, want us to get organized, want us to slap it to grid, want us to auto-tune it, want us to stick it into a file, and we transfer it. And I just think, as I've maintained for well over a year now on this vlog, that I just think it's the worst place to do our work. This shouldn't be what our workplace looks like. It should look like this. I don't want my workflow to be defined by the likes of Apple, IBM, or even Avid. I want to be free to express myself. I remember going to Air Adele Studios once, and they were shooting the score to The Proposition. It was Nick Cave and Warren Ellis. And I remember seeing this mass, this kind of spewing of leads, guitars and amps and little sampler units and delay pedals and looping boxes. And I remember just being so struck by how brilliant and exciting that looked, that it wasn't all sat inside a box with someone silently clicking away, that they were just plugging, unplugging, twisting and flicking. So let's start this next modular story. And actually, it does start in a clerical device with two tiny SD cards with stuff that I prepared in my humble calculator. You'll see that we've got a bunch of MIDI files, A through to O, and a MIDI playlist which is plain text for the thing that it's going to go into, the Disting Mk. They're basically a selection of MIDI files with little basically flowers going da-da-dum, but in different orders, every single one of them different. And then we've got a bunch of samples, 1 to 33, so 33 samples. We'll have a look at our list here. And the idea basically with these is both the MIDI files on this one and the samples on this one are going to be triggered randomly within the Frankensynth. Okay, 5 voices, 3 from the Frankensynth, 1 drums from the DFAM, and my trusty Schimmel upright. The heartbeat of the whole operation is our Metropolis here. Basically, the DFAM doesn't send out clock sync, it only receives. So as you can see here, when we hit run, we're sending it some clock from the Metropolis. I don't know if I'm imagining things, but CV clock feels to me to be tighter than MIDI clock. So this is going into a completely independent mixer, not going into this unit at all. It is simply synchronizing between the two. So let's have a listen to that. I start with the cutoff all the way down. It's got a nice kind of ultra voxy sound. Then what I decided to do is I wanted some slightly more 16-y feelings from it. So I've got the DFAM coming into this strymon timeline that I actually tried to synchronize via this multi-clock. I'm struggling at the moment, but I will come back to this in future. I'm hoping that this is going to be the kind of tempo hub of my out-of-the-box system. So basically I've got a kind of slightly triplet-y dotted pattern, which is a kind of a lo-fi sound, so we don't get too much of the thumping bottom end. That's going in mono, coming out mono, and then going into the big sky just on a very short room setting with the mix down, just to give it a bit of stereoification. I tried this marine layer reverb. Don't see the point of that if it's not stereo, to be honest. So let's have a listen to that. And it's panned slightly, even though the 16th pattern is stereo. I've panned it slightly. This is a great way of carving little holes for your different bits. Let's go from drums to bass. What I love about Modular is that you can have several different things influencing the same outcome. So for my bass, I've got the pulse of the bass totally being controlled by the Metropolis sequencer, but the pitch is actually being controlled via MIDI. I've got my little portable keyboard set up here by the piano. And then the third influencer is this maths. I think it's an LFO. Is it an LFO? When you stick that in cycle, does that not make it an LFO? Well, it's a cycling sweep of control voltage that is controlling the shape, which I believe is some form of filter. That's it. Closed, and then it opens up. And see this is controlling the gate. Okay, and then let's listen to the other oscillator. So that's the first voice in the Frankensynth. So our next voice, we've got the Disting, which is being triggered by the Metropolis, which is basically firing a clock sync into here, massively divided, and then every once in a while this will fire a MIDI sequence. But also what's making it interesting is the woggle bug. Now if you have a look, every 2 bars this will just blink. So that basically is a totally random control voltage that's going in to the Disting, and according to that totally random voltage, the Disting will pick a different MIDI file. So basically I have no knowledge of which MIDI file is going to be played less. And because it's far from a perfect circuit, occasionally this will glick, but in ways that's absolutely fantastic. So let's have a look at it. Go ping there, and it's selected a different MIDI file. So let's have a listen to that Atlantis with these MIDI files being played. Okay, so that's repeating. And then a new MIDI file. There we go, nice little glitch there, but it'll all be in time. This is slightly modulating with an LFO internally, nothing that I've really rigged up. It's kind of interesting. Okay, and then we've got it going into the Echophon delay unit here, which is synced up, not with tempo, but literally by hand, which is a nightmare with these big floppy knobs. And then we've added some reverb. I love that slightly metallic sounding reverb. Nice sound. So that's the second voice. Now the third voice is the star of the show for me, this second Disting unit, which is firing off string samples. Again, once every 2 bars, the woggle bug is firing at a total random CV. I've used these attenuators here just to get the right kind of mixture, so it's not just playing the first and the last sample, just the right kind of voltage, so it really does give a random thing. So if we have a look at this here, boom, there we go. And the sample changes, and again, similar to the MIDI file here, it's being triggered on a massively kind of clock divided from the Metropolis. So this is going into the magneto. Let's just have a listen to the dry level. So this is just the single sample being made. It's going to switch sample now. And then I've just got, using one tape head, a massive number of repeats up here. Just send it the recording level it needs. Obviously a lovely bed, kind of ambient bed of strings there, but basically what the real balancing act that I've played with this is so that we can really hear the odd line really creep through when it's a little bit more kind of emotional, and then playing off that with the piano. So we're going from the Disting into the magneto and then into clouds. So let's take the blend down of that. And then if we take this up, it's a kind of phasey, delayed reverb. Just adds, again, more beautiful wash there. Now I'm actually going into that via these two units here. I'm basically just using these as mini mixers. So we've got the strings left going into the second in there and the strings right into the second filter there, but I'm not doing any filtering, as you can see, and then these are going into the clouds. The other thing that's going into these that we're mixing together is actually the piano, which is coming in here, left and right. So let's have a listen to the piano. This is it dry. We've got the dry signal in there. And then with clouds, it sounds like this. But then I'm also using my old favourite, the Fractal AxeFx Black Hole Patch 138. Now surprisingly, if you have a listen to it soloed, it's actually surprisingly mono for a reverb. So I've got it going into this vintage dimension D. If we plug that in here, let's have a listen to what that sounds like. It's basically a chorus box that only has 4 settings, totally untweakable. These 3 are quite chorusy sounding. This is just a kind of, it's almost like a spreader, but fantastic, smooth, doesn't sound like chorus. That's the most important thing. So my ambition is to create music out of the box in single takes, no digital edits. It's the second take you're going to see. The first take was interesting. The first take was more kind of note perfect, but the way that the Frankensynth and the filters were opening and the way the random sequences and the random string samples were working just wasn't as interesting as take 2. It just had that kind of X factor. So what you're going to see is totally unedited, take 2, all played live, just myself and my Frankensynth. So here we go. But before the weather completely closes in on me, the best part of creating any modular patch is, of course, a freshly shaved modular rig. That patch has disappeared forever into the ephemera. Thanks as always for watching. If you haven't hit like and you do like what I do, I'd really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, I would recommend it. Lots of exciting patches coming up. And if you want to be notified the next time I put a video up, just hit the little bell button. See you next week. Right, I've got to rescue this camera before it kind of drowns.